Hey guys, Thomas the Silly Genie here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review the video game Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. Now, I usually review games right after I've completed my Let's Play of them, by the way. The link to the first part of this will be up in the description below, so you can check out this Let's Play of mine on your own time and leisure. But I did want to make sure that I completed the other two stories at least off screen before I did this review, and I had just finished it pretty, based on when this review is getting it up. It happened a few days ago. But nonetheless, I am here to review both the gameplay and the story, that being actually in vice versa order. I'll be talking about the story first and then the gameplay. So the story is actually cut up into 3 stories, technically. We follow the story of Terra, Ventus, and Aqua. And yes, after playing through quite a bit of Ventus's story, I finally put it together that this is indeed a prequel. Oh yes, by the way, I guess this is also going to be a spoiler review for a game that's already kind of old anyway. But anyways, if seeing young Hercules wasn't enough, we also get to see young Sora and Riku and Kairi in this game as well. So if I wasn't able to put it together that it was a prequel before, that next hint would have given it away, obviously. So, I did technically play Ventus's story first, and I do think that that was a bit of a mistake. I mean, for the channel, no, not so much. I don't think it would have really mattered. But for the sake of putting the puzzle pieces together, I do think that the order it actually shows on the title screen or on the select menu to be the correct order, that being Terra goes first, then Ventus, and then it ends with Aqua. You can even see this in the version that I played. It actually shows which series of events takes place first, which ones take place second, and which ones take place third. And of course, most of Terra's sequences usually take place first. And Aqua's usually always takes place last. Usually, that is the scenario. And Ventus is sort of always in between. But, yes. I do admit that when I was playing Ventus's story, it was kind of confusing seeing how he learned what inversed the enemy type was on his own. Just sort of, you get like the little title thing that says, or the title information thing that says like, oh, you have to face these inversed now, and then he suddenly knows what they are. It was a little bit of poor part on the story's part, at least for Ventus's story, but I do feel like the others do pick that up, especially if you played as Terra first. I do feel like that makes the whole unversed situation make a little bit more sense. Anyways, each of these characters are going out to these different worlds for different reasons. Terra is going out to essentially do his job, but also figure out on his own how to rid of this darkness that he is dealing with. So his little connection to Riku later on in the story, which he does see, does make sense, and of course that would mean that Ventus has the most connection with Sora and Aqua with Kairi. You have your Trinity here, you have your Trinity in Kingdom Hearts. So there you go. While Terra is dealing with that, Ventus is particularly interested in finding Terra, but then gets kind of roped into helping all these others and trying to make new friends along the way. He even says that he kind of does want to make new friends on his little journey. And Aqua was told to essentially keep track of Terra and make sure that he doesn't get lost to the darkness. And along the way, she does come across Ven, as he calls himself for short, and ends up trying to get him to go home, as well as the situation around them is getting more and more dangerous. So with that being said, I do feel like this story actually for the most part is pretty solid, and if I had just played Ven's story, I probably wouldn't have been saying this, as I do feel like there were quite a few gaps. Even by the end of it, it kind of left on a weird note of like, oh, I'm gonna look for him in vague, the sort of vague of like, was he talking about Sora? I mean, Sora's kind of young, I don't know. Uh, so, yeah. Uh, we learn of Vanitas, which is the evil part of Ven, and he is the one who is making all of these unversed, and each of them have to fight off him at one point or another in their respected stories. So, all the meanwhile, you're probably wondering where King Mickey comes in. Well, he kind of jumps in primarily. I don't recall where he ends up in Terra's story, but he does show up more often, I think, in Ven's and Aqua's story anyway. So he's kind of skipping around on his own terms, and he kind of bumps into one of them first. I assume it's Ven, but I don't know for sure. But anyway, he ends up, trying to help each of them at some point or another, I suppose. Anyways, so as the three come together at one point, they separate once again and are reunited for the big conclusion, which they say to go to the graveyard of the Keyblade War, which is something that has been alluded to primarily in this game as some sort of events that happen even further back in Kingdom Hearts history. So I'm not even sure if there is a game for that sequence of events, but whatever. Nonetheless, each of them must face Vanitas, and we see that when Terra does give in to the darkness, he is the one who turns into the leader of the organization, that version of Xemnas, as Xemnas, like, the one that's there, sacrifices his body or whatever for that. We see that Vanitas takes control of Ven, and then something happens kind of with Aqua, as she is sort of the last one to leave the scene, as her events, as I mentioned, are the last events in the video game, and I'm sure that there's some sort of secret ending. Unfortunately, I did not get quite there yet, but I'm sure it would fill in like a smaller, minor gap or something or other for each of them. I don't know. But I will get to that at one point, but I feel like I have enough information to do this review at the very most. I did complete all three of their stories, so I did feel like that was at least enough for this review. I do feel like after playing all three stories, it is a more solid story, even though I feel like out of the three of them, Ven is actually the weakest story. As, again, it kind of does end on the most vague note about who he's referring to. Again, my money was on Sora, but again, I couldn't say for sure. I couldn't say 100%, like, definitively that is the case, but anyways. After playing all three stories, I do think that it is a solid 7 out of 10. However, I will say with a caveat that I do think that playing in order does make it, it does. That's what warrants the 7 out of 10. If you play it out of order, you're probably not gonna like it as much as far as like trying to follow what's going on. And I kind of had that issue, particularly starting the video game, as far as the story was concerned. So yeah, there is that obvious caveat, and I shouldn't been. I should have put it together that they were in the order that the story when it was in, but there was no other indication that that was the case, unfortunately. So that was kind of on me as well, I suppose, not figuring that out. Anyways, let's talk about the gameplay. I do feel like the gameplay here is a little bit rougher than the previous installments of Kingdom Hearts, unfortunately. I find it even odder that the more skills you learn, it feels like the less control you have, particularly with two functions, that being a block and dash. Now, if you don't know Kingdom Hearts, these two buttons are both assigned to the square button, at least. That's what I just had it set to the normal controls. I didn't like mess with anything. So, block is performed by just pressing square, and dash is performed by pressing square while holding a direction, and you would dash in that direction. However, I particularly faced most of this issue with playing with actually Terra's story, particularly at the closer to the end of it when I said I mentioned I unlocked more of his abilities. One of the hardest bosses I think I've ever faced in Kingdom Hearts history, out of all the games, besides Maleficent and Kingdom Hearts 1, was Master Aqua, which is their master, respectively, all three of them. This guy was freaking hard. He has one of the craziest combos ever. When I first faced him, under-leveled, by the way, I will say that one of the bigger issues with this gameplay is that the level indication is utter bullshit. It is just awful. It does not tell you the level you need to be to go to any of this world. It says a combat level, which is not indicative of the actual level you are. It always only goes up by one, that being the combat level. However, the actual level you need to be to actually accomplish said level, that is left up in the air, completely not there, and I noticed the extreme level of escalation, especially when I was playing Aqua's story, when I got to Stitch's world for the first time. The enemies had a lot more health. They were able to do a lot more damage to me, the player character, and that level of escalation was promptly put up with me going back to a previous world and training up, because I had no clue that I was supposed to have leveled up to be in that world in the first place. So that was a bit of a hindrance of the level of escalation, and I do think that that is an issue when your level of escalation suddenly rises and there's no indication of like, oh, this is when things get real. For Terra, primarily, that level of escalation rose when I, as I mentioned, faced Master Aqua, one of the hardest boss battles I think I have ever faced. His arrangement of moves, he has this long string of combo, and when I first arrived on there, his combo would kill me, completely, and then I had to level up so that would not happen. He definitely has some other moves, and then as you start to take away some of his health, he gets even more moves, and his saying, one of his, like, sayings is, like, to say a certain thing, and then, like, he would do something, like, say, shoot these little light ball things at you, and then he would say the same saying when he was weaker, but then he would shoot out all these, like, beam of rays, and then they would spin. And when I was fighting him and I was seeing the light balls attack, I would usually go in on him and attack because he would leave himself open. But when he was weaker and I first leapt in to attack and he shot out the beams, I died. Like, I was like, oh, well, that just happened, okay. So there was definitely a huge learning curve there. Learning how to block properly was probably one of the more things that I had to pick up, especially with Terra in that fight. Um, and I don't mind that itself, like learning how to block and doing that, like learning different combat style than I'm used to. I was actually fine with that itself. The level of escalation is where I have most of my issue with that fight with. It kind of just drops out of nowhere, or I should say raises out of nowhere, or rises out of nowhere, sorry, look, words. Uh, so yes, and that problem actually, again, came up with Aqua, but oddly enough, I never came across it with Ven until the very, very end, where the final fight occurs. Other than that, Ven didn't really seem to have a level of escalation that I noticed. Maybe I leveled him up more earlier on and I just wasn't really paying attention to it. I don't know. But nonetheless, that doesn't stop it from having its issues there. In the case of Aqua, oh, sorry, I'm still actually on Terra because I was mentioning the block versus the dash. In the final boss, this is one of the biggest issues I had with Terra, is distinguishing the block from the dash. Sometimes I would be standing perfectly still, not holding the directional buttons, and I would still be dashing, and I would be like, no, I don't want to dash, I want to block his attacks now. And that kind of got really annoying. I wish that the game had a separate button between blocking and then holding a button in dash. I wish they were two different buttons from each other, so that way there wouldn't be any confusion about which one I wanted to perform. So yes. But yeah, getting back to Aqua, her level of escalation, as I mentioned, was primarily in the world of Stitch. As I mentioned, the enemies became harder, but that quickly, as I mentioned, I just went back to another world and leveled up. Her second level of escalation comes as well as the end as well. So all three of their levels of escalation come at the end. Aqua has one in the world of Stitch, which I didn't feel with the other two characters. And then Terra has one facing Master Aeroquist. I feel like that was definitely a huge spike in the level of escalation. And again, it kind of coming out of nowhere. And by the way, the reason why I was like, I didn't want to like end that fight particularly because I didn't think I had saved it. And I thought, oh, this boss will probably be hard, but it'll be passable. Turns out that that was not the case. I had to do a lot more to get ready for that fight. So yeah, that was definitely a huge curveball that I was not expecting to happen. So I do feel like the combat in this game does suffer. I feel like the more the characters learn as far as what they are able to do, the less control you have. And I feel like that should be the reverse of everything. There are definitely a lot of times when I was fighting Vanitas as Ven where I was like, oh, I'll just do the full combo, but then the full combo is always punished by getting hit. So I would, like, eventually learn, as the other two characters, like, to hit twice and then, like, roll out of the way or whatever, or dash out of the way. Depending on what character you are, they do different things, by the way. Vanitas has his roll, Terra has his dash, and Aqua has a handstand that she just sort of does that, yeah. So I found myself using the most magic with Aqua. I was like trying to figure out or see how effective magic actually was, since like every other level, the magic would increase. So I was starting to become curious as like how effective magic is actually, and it proved to be pretty effectual again up until that level of escalation. Um, it actually proved to be pretty useful. So there was some merit to that. And they do have their little side game within the game, which is this board game that you can play uh, to get some to boost up your other skills and get some other new ones as well. So if there are any secret keyblades besides the ones you unlock, through progressing through the story. I have no clue how to get them, if there are any of that nature. So there's that. So I don't know. There seems to be plenty of these recipes lying about, but I have no clue what they do, even to this point, even after completing the game. I don't know if they unlock any new items in the store or anything. I just don't know. So if anyone can fill me in on that, I would love to know in the comments at the very most. I know that won't save the game completely, but I think it's a small little interesting tidbit to learn. So as far as the combat is concerned, in a score that I would give the combat is a 5 out of 10. By the way, there are also these kind of sort of annoying missions that are protect this character mission, which are they weren't too bad. One comes in pretty early for Aqua, and that one was kind of annoying. It was protect Cinderella for these 2 rooms, and then the damage actually carried over from one room to another room. So when she entered the second room and I was trying to do my best to protect her, she was already quite damaged in the second room and kind of died the instant she entered the second room with all these big enemies. So there's kind of annoying missions as well. And there's just some wonky controls, as I mentioned, between dashing and blocking. I feel like them having these simplistic combos is actually kind of a hindrance on it as well. I do appreciate that they have these several finishers they can unlock. I have no clue what activates which one though, so that's kind of just left in the void of I don't know. So there is that. It did look like all their finishers were kind of the same, at least the main one, the main setup ones were kind of all the same. They seem to have all their unique magical elements though. Though I never found myself using them all that much. I found just striking them with the Keyblade primarily, again, to be the most effective thing to eventually be the case. Not with Aqua, but, again, with Aqua I was trying to do the most experimenting, particularly with magic. There was still this whole other system of, if you lock on to the enemy and then press a button, and then it would do this whole other spell thing, and I did that 3 times in the entire game just to see what they would look like, and then I never touched them again. So I feel like there's very little reason for that. I feel like the menus of the command deck could have used a little bit of simplifying. There's this whole other subsystem of if you combine this skill with this skill, you can get this skill with a certain other skill. There's so much in this that I feel like it's kind of there, but it feels very I personally underutilized a lot of it because I felt like the combat was enough to keep me satisfied enough. even though I feel like the characters themselves should have unlocked more natural abilities within the way they strike or use their keyblades themselves. So yeah, definitely a very mixed bag. I feel like we're trying to add a lot of elements here, but a lot of them some of them kind of fell flat or were, since they were on the same button as the dash and roll, were kind of got jumbled up together in this unfortunate way. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with my score of an unfortunate 5 out of 10. I feel like this is the weakest it's ever been as far as combat is concerned, and in the story, after only playing all three of them, I would give a solid 7. If I had not played that, I would have probably said that this is also the weakest of the stories in the Kingdom Hearts series. I probably also would have given it either a 5 or a 6 out of 10. Just saying. So I definitely feel like this prequel was definitely the weakest in the series. But I still had enough when I wasn't getting very annoyed by the super hard bosses. I was having fun seeing all the other little bits of the story, like seeing these worlds that weren't really explored in the other games. The dialogue has always kind of been this very simplistic thing, except when it's trying to be vague, unfortunately, as I mentioned at the end there. But anyways, that is my review of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out that link in the description. Now head over to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye. Oh, bye-bye.